lot like Ventura, California, under a storm warning. Yeah, so supposed to be hit for some rain and some thunder and some stuff. Right now it's just gloomy, and we're going for a walk because that's what we try and do every day. And it's Saturday, and it's Valentine's Day. For those of you out there who are lucky enough to have a family member or loved one or partner or beloved pet or stuffed animal or favorite food to celebrate it with. And for the rest of us, happy first day of spring, happy Lupercalia. Or for those of you who don't believe any of that, it's Saturday and we're halfway through February. Congratulations, spring is supposed to be here. Summer's right around the corner, and then Halloween. And I'll be 60, God help us. All right, nothing in the news today, so we're gonna go back to our other topic. Dungeons, bum, 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 ooh, scary hole in ground. Yeah, it was Brian from Insurance Live. Fun. Okay, Tressure. We haven't talked about Tressure yet, right? You can't talk about dungeons and stuff without the treasure. The bad guys have stuff, and we normally take the stuff with us for reasons. Treasure can be broken down into two groups, right? And it's as long as we just think about that, it's pretty easy to justify most of the stuff you'll find in a dungeon. Treasure is either already there when they got there, gems, gold, precious resources, stuff that was just, there, naturally occurring, foodstuffs, animals, whatever your bad guys went in that place for and found. So, whatever, wheat, quartz, obsidian. So that's the first thing, and that's going to be 80% of the source of treasure is stuff that was there when we got there. That gold was in the mine. We just mined it out. Those gems were there. We just mined them out. Those blackberry bushes were already there. We just cultivated them, right? Now the second part is stuff that we brought with us. And that's the other stuff. That's the kind we're most used to. That's the gold pieces and the artwork and the magic items and the barrels of pickles and the beds and all the stuff we brought with us, or stuff we stole and then we're storing. Doesn't matter where it came from. It might be ours. It might be we took it from someone else. Doesn't matter. We're bringing it here and we're putting it in here. And sometimes it's on us. Sometimes it's in our chest. Whatever. We brought the treasure from someplace else and we brought it in here. And a subcategory of the brought it with us, of course, is the stuff that you got buried with. Now, before I started recording this, I was thinking about burials, and stuff you would find digging up a grave. And, I think it's fair to say that compared to today, our ancestors went all out on burials. Even nobody's got buried with stuff. Jewelry, family mementos, during the Victorian age and during the early colonizations, we had tombs, we had mausoleums. Grandma was buried with all her stuff, all her jewelry. And in the old days, you had temples and pyramids and tombs, and people were buried with stuff. When you go to a museum and look at displays of stuff they found, like in the Egyptian pyramids or whatever, it's a garage sale of stuff. We'll find a lapis engraved vase and a couple $1,000 worth of gold and jewels, but then you also find like a wagon and farming equipment and just stuff. We buried people with stuff because we thought they would need that stuff in the next life, or it was a way to show how important they were by burying them with their stuff, or maybe secretly it was a way to get out of the whole who inherits what bullshit. All right, who knows? Maybe we've got the whole burying people with stuff wrong. Maybe the reason why they buried people with all their stuff is so they didn't have to worry about who got what. Uncle Dave really wanted that gold chair. We buried it. Because nowadays, people fight over all the stuff. And you're either buried in a box that's dropped into a hole in the ground, or you're burnt. Nobody gets buried with their stuff anymore, except I guess maybe if they're extremely wealthy. But in D&D terms, a aspect of we brought it with us. Hi. And Jacob says, message retracted. An aspect that we brought it with us is the dead guy. We left it with the dead guy. And then the adventurers dig in there. We don't often think about the other stuff. We tend to focus on the monetary stuff. The first thing we think about when we're designing treasure is money. How much money did they have on them? How much money did they have with them? How much money did they bring with them? Where are they storing that money? How much money? And then we move on to, money-like objects, art, jewelry, painting, sculptures, things that were built to show your affluence, to show your artistic change, to show off. The more stuff you had was because you could afford to have more stuff, and as a way to establish your I'm more important than you because I have more stuff. I can afford more stuff, therefore I'm richer than you, therefore I'm more important than you. The rule of stuff. So we would bury the stuff, and the bad guys would have the stuff with them in the cave. So then we get your art objects, your jewelry objects. Then we get your just plain weird stuff. In D&D, that's like the magic, right? In modern days, in the real world, when we find weird stuff, it's like a wagon. I think Kim Jong has in his tomb for when he's going to be buried inside that mountain a solid gold alligator. For reasons, because he can, because he's Kim Jong. But that would be the kind of shit that they would either already be there if they were buried with it, or the stuff that they would bring them are the ways that show wealth. And then the next level of treasure would be stuff we brought with us, or stuff we found that just everyday things. And that's when we don't really think about, treasure a lot. Brock sent me $1. Thank you, Brock. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. You don't often see in dungeons normal stuff. Because normal stuff's not exciting, right? A coil of rope is far more likely to be found than a magic pair of gauntlets or a potion of healing. You're more likely to find useful stuff than you are to find a magic baseball glove. But useful stuff is boring. No one wants to hear you list off all the normal stuff. How many modules in the old days that have like a barrel of 10,000 nails, and the party would be like, okay, well, I don't fucking care. Where's the treasure, right? A barrel filled with 10,000 nails is boring unless you can weaponize it or think you can sell it. If you're going to sell it, you have to consider, can I carry a barrel of 10,000 nails back to the city? How much is a barrel of 10,000 nails actually going to be worth? Is it worth it for me as opposed to this solid gold idol? So you don't see a lot of stuff for many reasons. Mostly because stuff is boring. But you have to think, when designing treasure, are you in Nevada? Yes, we all know I live in the fictional town of Fresno, Nevada, which is located somewhere in the White Pine community, and looks vaguely like a park in Southern California. But yes, we all know that I am broadcasting live from Station Site B, KSIB Radio, FM, in the fictional town of Fresno, Nevada. No, I live in Ventura, but no, that's boring. You can't live in California. Oh, you're right, I don't. I'm a fictional character who lives in a fictional town. Treasure. We're talking about treasure. We're talking about what are you going to throw in? Now, does the treasure need to fit the theme of the adventure? Sometimes, but not always. Again, 80% of the stuff you're going to find should make sense to be there. If it's a gold mine, because for some reason that's my favorite example, you're going to find gold mine stuff that they would use to mine for gold, and stuff that the bad guys brought with them when they took over the mine. You're not going to find a lot of things that aren't appropriate for a gold mine. You'll find a few things because whatever, because this is a D&D adventure, because maybe the raiders brought stuff with them from a previous robbery, maybe a previous group of adventurers dropped stuff, maybe just happenstance they just found a wagon or raided a wagon and brought it into the gold mine. Oh, happy little dog. Hi, buddy. Oh, you are so cute. It's one of those mini huskies. Adorable, but probably has like a lifespan of like 2 years. But he's so cute. Yeah, so 80% of the treasure should make sense, right? If I'm in a castle, 80% of the things I'm going to find are castle stuff. If I'm aboard the Death Star, 80% of the things I'm going to find are spaceship stuff. Some of that stuff is interesting because it's treasure. It's sparkly. Some of that stuff is just going to be boring. You know, I found a protractor. I found a box of shovels. It's stuff that's going to be there, but it's not interesting to the players. But it does help to tell the story of the location. So that's something we don't really think about enough. And it's understandable, like I said, because normal stuff is boring. But is there a way to weave the normal stuff in with the story of the dungeon, as well as having all the exciting stuff? The actual loot, you know. And we haven't even got to the weird stuff yet in D&D. That's the magic stuff, right? Now, the rules of D&D say that if they have magic stuff, they never use it. It's just sitting there waiting for you to take it. They will blatantly ignore the resources they have when you burst into the room. And then you just get to toddle off with their collection of stuff. Hardly ever, unless the DM actually adds it in their imagination, do you see the bad guys use stuff? The stuff. What's in the treasure chest? Oh, 8 different potions. At no point in time do the bad guys think to drink one of those potions to help them out in the fight? Read that scroll? Use that wand of lightning bolts? No, because the unwritten rule of D&D treasure, of Diablo treasure, says it just don't. Or it doesn't exist until they're dead. That's the rule of Diablo treasure, right? They don't drop the stuff until after they're dead. Doesn't matter if logically they can't carry it. What is that swarm of bees doing with a spear? Doesn't matter. So unfortunately, that's a gimme, right? The technology available on this Death Star should have been at the point where they should have been able to stop the gang. But they don't. It's there, they just never use it. The logic of the dungeon says, well, they should use all the magic items and potions and stuff they've accumulated to stop the pesky adventurers, but they don't. Why? They just don't. Some later on, some more recent adventurers have addressed that, and you do have bad guys actually using their stuff. But in general, nope. And of course, our how did it get there kind of starts to falter when we start thinking about the story of why these magic thingies are there. Okay? You're not really gonna find a cave that's filled with randomly growing magic items. I mean, you could find some paramutation of that idea, you know, magic crystals or magic apples or a magic fountain. But in general, when you're mining for gold, you're going to find gold. You're not going to find a potion of healing. So any weird stuff would have had to either been buried with them, if we're doing old-fashioned crypt type thinking, or they brought with them. They brought with them. And that's really going to be the bulk of the treasure, right? Is stuff they brought with them. And how does that stuff help tell the story of the dungeon? Humanoids bring stuff with them. We like to settle in. And I assume that goes the same for fantastical humanoids like orcs and goblins and stuff. Once they claim something is theirs, they like to dig in. They like to bring their stuff. We like to bring our stuff with us or get new stuff and put it with us because that makes it ours. Until we start really bringing our stuff, we don't think of it as ours, until the goblins lick the wall. But once they've got their stuff in, it becomes theirs, and it adds to the story. So we know any financial stuff was either there when they got there, gold mine, or they brought it with it because, an army travels on its stomach and on money, or because, most bad guys were robbing, stealing. We came here because we needed a place to store all our stuff. Pirates burying treasure, whatever, right? Where are we going to keep all the stuff we just stole from the caravan? We can't carry it with us. So we go back home and we put it there. But then we have the other stuff, the magic stuff, the stuff that makes a dungeon work, the stuff that makes the dungeon story cohesive. I'm going through a gold mine. Not only do I think I'm going to find gold mine stuff, but I'm going to find the stuff they brought with them to make the gold mine more habitable and more workable as a home. And that should be thought of in the room design and the treasure. And the last thinking about treasure, now that we have the treasure that's telling the story, and we have our magic doohickeys, and we've turned our dungeon into a living, breathing story. And everything that's there is either there for a reason or there because. Not everything has to be there for a reason. I'm sure we all have stuff in our house that just is there because. It serves no actual function other than bringing us joy. In your real house, it might be the TV, right? Most of us have a TV. What does the TV do? Entertains us. Yeah, that's it. Doesn't clean, doesn't contribute to the house, doesn't produce anything. It's just there cuz. So we're going to have a few there cuzes. The last thinking is, how do I take this stuff with me? And what am I going to get for it? Because another thing we never think about when we're thinking about treasure is the vast amount of wealth your typical adventuring party is going to bring back to town. And in the typical D&D story, up till they come back from that first adventure, that town has never had that much of a gold rush. Now suddenly you've got first level nobodies bringing hundreds of gold pieces worth of tat into a town that up till now maybe has a working economy of a gold piece per person. It's still on the copper and silver economy. If you're lucky, you get one gold coin for your birthday, and that's supposed to last you an entire year. One gold is a week's wages. Now there's these idiots bringing in hundreds of gold. How are they carrying it? How are they carrying that giant ivory bathtub? How is the city going to be able to justify bringing in this vast amount of crap and giving the party back fair value? They can't. They can't. Unless it's already been established that the town has access to a vast trove of wealth that they can then buy, trade, and sell stuff for the party. And I'm not even counting stores that sell magic items, because I don't think stores should sell magic items, but just your normal fantasy, Old West, space station, what have you, society doesn't have a lot of just money laying around. It's always working. It's always being reinvested, unless it's a town that has a bank. And even then, most of the money in the bank is tied to something. So suddenly, Bob, the first level fighter, comes back from his first foray into the caves of OGGM, and he's brought a couple hundred gold pieces worth of tat. First, we got to figure out, how's Bob carrying all that tat? And second, we got to figure out, what is the town going to do with all that tat? What is Bob going to want in exchange for that tat? Right? How do I, Bill the shopkeeper, Susan the seamstress, Dave the barber, and Mayor Tom, suddenly deal with hundreds of gold pieces dropped into the town, where up to now, the most money I've ever seen is maybe 1 gold a year? How does that change the town? How does that create a adventurer first economy? And that's a whole separate video to think about the idea of adventurer first economy. But you have to assume that if we have this perpetual waterfall of treasure that the adventurers are going to find, and that perpetual waterfall of treasure gets larger and larger the more they adventure, and progressively weirder and weirder, some type of economy is going to develop to take advantage of that. Because otherwise, much like ghost towns, when the gold runs out, if suddenly the adventurers leave, the town can no longer support itself unless it's become an adventurer first economy and has found a way to capitalize on Bob and his never-ending collection of treasure. And what is that treasure? How is Bob carrying it? What is the story of the treasure? Going back to the beginning, there's really only 2 types of treasures. There's stuff that was there when we got there, gold mine, or there's stuff that we brought with us, or subcategory, stuff we buried with you. And then, once you've successfully completed the story of the adventure, you have this stuff. And for every gold piece, you've got a barrel of nails. And you have to decide, what's going to be worth the most money? What can I feasibly take back with me? And then as the village, you have to start thinking, what am I going to do with this sudden influx of money? Because it never ends well. Because much like a gold rush, eventually those adventurers are going to leave. And if I haven't adapted the social economy to deal with the ebb and flow of this waterfall of gold, and then the eventual leaving of the waterfall of gold, you're kind of screwed. You're screwed at the beginning and you're screwed at the end. And in the middle, if you're smart, you can take advantage of the treasure, but, more often than not. So I guess we have to talk about adventurer first economy at one point in time. But that's it for our walk today. The weather is getting gloomy. Don't know what's going on, but it's definitely messing with my allergies. So have a great Valentine's Day to all of you. Thank you for the $1 Brock sent. And I will talk to you all later. Happy whatever. See ya.